resignation of Britain's Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner resigned on Friday after an investigation found she breached the ministerial code by underpaying on a property tax in a major blow to Prime Minister Keir Starmer's embattled Labour government. Angela Rayner, a figurehead among the party's left-wing base, had last week admitted not paying enough on the flat purchase and referred herself to the government's independent ethics advisor. In a letter to Mr. Starmer, ethics chief Laurie Magnus wrote that Rayner had failed to heed the caution of legal advice she had received and had therefore breached the ministerial code.
Threatening our borders and a possible trade crisis in Northern Ireland. Britain has no...
Political commentator Nathaniel Ogunniyi joins me on the news to discuss the development in the UK. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
While this is the right thing to do for Rayner in terms of resignation, but this is really, really sad. She had a remarkable journey in her political career, already seen as the woman for the top job. I mean, how is Britain reacting to her resignation, and what's your reaction as well?
So Angela Rayner was a politician that had a lot of what we call cut through. So she was a politician that was known outside of her brief. She was quite well known by the general public, partially because of her background and her direct manner of speaking. And so she got quite a high media profile through that. And so what you now see is a number of people remarking, as you say, on sadness at her departure, although the facts of the case are clear. She was told to seek advice, independent advice on the tax that was due, and she failed to do so. What you found over the last few years before Labour came into government, the Conservative Party, while they were undergoing scandals, Angela Rayner was often the minister that would be leading the charge against Conservative ministers, whether it was due to tax issues or alleged impropriety. And so because she seemed to set the standard for others, because she seemed to go after others, it's now come back to her.
Mm. And this is also very ironic, being the housing secretary as well, and one would imagine that she knows the housing rules. But she will now go back to the parliament. What does this mean for her career in the long run?
So the difficulty for Angela Rayner now is she had been planning to use her role as deputy leader to sort of consolidate her power base within the party and eventually make the step to leader of the party when the current leader of the party and Prime Minister Keir Starmer steps down. That route for her is now a little bit more difficult because, of course, she's undergone this scandal, which has had some impact on her rating. It's had some impact on her standing, not just within the left wing of her party, which is where her base often is, but within the public more generally. And so it makes just that bit harder for her to reach that leadership position in the future.
And just talking about rating, it's been a very difficult first year for Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the Labour Party as a whole. In terms of rating, they are trailing the Nigel Farage's Reform Party just by a lot of points. And we've also seen 8 resignations. This is the 8th one in Keir Starmer's government. How deep of a crisis is this for the Prime Minister?
So the Prime Minister was really not hoping to be in this position. He's had the fastest fall in popularity ratings of any government in the UK ever. And so 1 year into government, he really didn't want to be in this position. As you know, we've had a number of ministerial resignations. Other than Angela Rayner, there have been scandals for other ministers. So for instance, one was Tulip Siddiq, who was formerly the Minister for Financial Services and the Minister for Anti-Corruption. And it turned out that she was being investigated for corruption in Bangladesh, linked to some family political links she had there. Equally, the Transport Secretary was then found to have been prosecuted for fraud before she came into government, and so she had to resign. So there have been a number of resignations that have happened over the last year due to impropriety or alleged impropriety by high-profile ministers. But more broadly, Keir Starmer would not want to be in this position because he's so far behind the Reform Party. So you have Nigel Farage's Reform Party, who currently only have 5 MPs out of 650 in Parliament, but they won a by-election in May of this year. They're topping all the opinion polls. They had their party conference in Birmingham last week, which was the first sort of main party conference that they've had since they've been topping the polls, and the atmosphere there was electric. And so the difficulty now is that it seems like the energy, it seems like the impetus is behind the Reform Party, as opposed to Keir Starmer's government.
And let's just do some comparative analysis between Keir Starmer's his cabinet members and that of Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak sort of had his challenges in government. I mean, that's why he's out. But in terms of the caliber of the people he picked for members of his cabinet and then what you see with Keir Starmer, just do an analysis for us in terms of capacity.
So I think by the time you had Rishi Sunak in post, you had a number of high-profile cabinet ministers who were able to bring their experience from other places in government, or indeed from their experience from business or outside of government when they came into that. I think with this government, you don't have that to the same extent. So for instance, you had David Cameron, who is appointed to the House of Lords and brought to Parliament as the Foreign Secretary by Rishi Sunak. That was the sort of move that allowed David Cameron to use the skills, the network, the expertise that he built up during his time as Prime Minister to come back and serve the country in a different way. Now, within the Labour Party, you don't quite have the same level of experience, or you don't quite have the same level of skill, because the last time the Labour Party were in government was before 2010. And so a lot of the people that held high-profile roles then have since left politics. A number of them have now come back. A number of them are working either as junior ministers who were advisors at the time, or indeed senior ministers now. But the level of experience, the level of caliber is not quite the same. And there's a dynamic within the Labour Party.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a dynamic within the Labour Party. Within the Labour Party, you tend to have a lot of people who have worked exclusively within politics. So they haven't had as much experience in business. They haven't really worked on the commercial side or elsewhere. But that's not so much within the Conservatives. And
perhaps why it was easy for Rishi Sunak to return to the corporate world, because he has done that before. But let's talk about the Labour Party. Could the Labour Party find itself unable to govern with this crisis, and then probably call for an early election?
So we see the chance of an early election at this stage as quite slim. If you're behind in the polls, then the incentive for you to call an election is quite low, because you don't really want to lose a bunch of seats that you already hold right now. So we think Labour will probably hold on until 2028. They'll probably hold on for as long as they can before they call the next election, at least till 2028, maybe until 2029. But the resignation of Angela Rayner does lead to a deputy leadership election. So it means that because Angela Rayner resigned all three of her posts as deputy leader of the Labour Party, as Deputy Prime Minister and as Housing Secretary, it means there is now an election within the Labour Party for a deputy leader. And the deputy leader now will have a position or a post that is able to challenge Keir Starmer. So a lot of backbench MPs who have been unsatisfied with the direction of travel within the first year of this government are now looking at that deputy leadership position as a potential way for them to challenge Keir Starmer, as a potential way for them to call for some changes in policy.
We understand that his Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, is also looking to run for that position as well. We'll continue to monitor politics in the UK. Always a pleasure to have you on, breaking down all of this for us, Nathaniel Oguni.
Thank you very much.